Hello students, I welcome you all to my Swayam course titled Comics and Graphic Novels in Indian Context. We are into the week 7 of our course and the theme of this week reflects around countering reality through graphic visuality. We have completed lecture 1 of this week, which was centering around Arijit Singh's graphic novel River of Stories, that talked about the theme of environmentalism and took us back to the time when Narmada Valley project, when Narmada Dam was being proposed in the Narmada Valley project. In today's lecture, which will be centering around Kashmir Pending by Nasir Ahmed and Saurabh Singh, which is the lecture 2 of this week, we will be talking about the state of Kashmir and how it has been drawn, illustrated, discussed in the graphic novel. We have been hearing several narratives centering around Kashmir since time immemorial. We also know that Kashmir shares a violent history and where there has been militant uprising, where there have been, people, all kinds of the army personnel are attacked and all kinds of activities and all kinds of actions and policies that the state government continues to implement in order to make the state a better place. The graphic novel Kashmir Painting was published in 2007. It was written by Nasir Ahmed and illustrated by Saurabh Singh. Phantomville has also produced this graphic novel Kashmir Pending along with Sarnath Banerjee's Corridor, that some references of which we had already discussed in week 2. Kashmir Pending remains notable for being one of the earliest graphic novels to address the Kashmir conflict. It saturates the political narrative through a personal lens, enabling the reader to understand the broader socio-political issues affecting Kashmir. And to the right of your screen, you see the cover page of the graphic novel Kashmir Pending. And it is in this manner, roughly, somewhat in this manner, the entire graphic novel has been drawn, which has very dark, very black color and very what can you say, there has been extensive use of black, red and green colors, and the entire graphic novel is all drawn in the shadowy image where the background is completely black, thus conveying the idea, the tone, the mood, setting it for the reader very well in advance that they are going to experience a very dark story. The narrative starts with the snippet of young Mushtaq, who remains seated by the riverside and aims to throw pebbles at the army boat heading towards the riverbank. Much of the events are told from Mushtaq's jail cell as he narrates his past to a fellow inmate Ali. Mushtaq recalls his early years, especially those spent in Nauhata at the heart of Srinagar, reminding him of his childhood days. As Mushtaq narrates, since his childhood, he and his friends had garnered hatred and enmity for the authorities, including the police and the armed forces, and one of their favorite acts was to throw stones at them. They didn't appreciate the Pandits who they felt complained at the most basic manner. So Kashmir Pending draws upon one of the most well-known, one of the most popular narratives from Kashmir, where the residents of the Kashmir, they are unhappy with the Indian army who's placed there, and they continue to indulge themselves in the act of violence against them, throw stones at them, and involve themselves with the planning and plotting against the army placed there. But all these actions also emerge from the kind of dissatisfaction, from the kind of from mainly young boys who for whom it is very easier to kind of fall into the wrong practices, fall into unethical and fall into the wrong notions and knowledge about why Indian army is placed there. It is not because it is not to harm them, but it is very well to prevent the terrorist activities, the unlawful entry into Kashmir, and kind of preventing the border, preventing the country from any kind of unknown strange activities that may take place there. So it is very easy for young boys and young people who can very well be manipulated to believe that the very army personnel are the reason for their unhappiness, for the sad state of affairs in Kashmir, because it is due to them that the violent activities continue to happen in the state, and it is because of them that the state is unable to enjoy peace, and it is because of them that the state is unable to remain or the state is unable to act in itself as happy as a kind of when compared to other states of India. But just as we know that Kashmir also had a very violent history from independence onwards, so it is because of this very reason to prevent the illegal migration, it is in order to prevent the unlawful activities, it is in order to prevent the uprising of local and also migrated elements which may not be good for the society. To prevent such kind of activities, the police personnel are, the army personnel are placed there. So, but yes, just as Mushtaq is like any other young boy for whom it is very easily to get manipulated by the stories, what the militant groups continue to, if they fall upon or if they come across any of the militant group, it is very easy to manipulate and to fabricate the knowledge in the minds of young men and kind of mobilize them against the army personnel who are placed in Kashmir. The political inklings and the spirit of freeing Kashmir remain enmeshed in him since his early days, and he remembers taking part in protests and marches alongside others. However, the colors and heart of a true rebel turned when he reached the age of 16, when he decided to translate his frustration into action. This was further fueled when he joined college and was overwhelmed by the ideological and revolutionary zeal. So it shows the growth of a character of Mushtaq, because Mushtaq is narrating a story. Mushtaq is recounting the events, that how did he land up here in the jail, or he is that I'm not going to disclose the suspense as of now, that to whom and why is he narrating this story, but these are the visuals that you go on to see in the graphic novel are in the mode of recollection. So they are all based on memory, and that is why there is black and white touch also to them, because in the form of black and white photographs, in the form of older photographs which are black and white, this is how memories continue to haunt us, memory continue to come back to us in the form of black and white images, which is representative of things that have gone by, things of the past. So as Mushtaq is narrating his journey, he tells the listener that this is how I grew when I was small. There were some triggers, there were people who kind of, with whom I was influenced, and they kind of were one of the main factors that I decided to be a rebel against the state itself. As Mushtaq mentions, he was influenced by speeches made by Qasim, who could stir the people into action with his words alone. Mushtaq later visits Qasim and through the latter's acquaintance meets Shahid, after which Mushtaq and his friend Aziz decide to enroll on the militant training camp in Mansara. However, their stay at Mansara proved to be inauspicious, and soon clashes brew between them and K Force or Chinar Force. Mushtaq and Aziz leave Mansara and leave for Afghanistan, where they remain for 2 months before heading back to Kashmir. So this is how he and his friend Mushtaq and Aziz, because they were caught in the uprising, because they were caught in planning a protest, or a kind of they were trying to in some way plan the action of uprising, plan to trigger an attack, to launch an attack on the Indian Army forces, and in an attempt, while they are in the midway, they are caught, and they feel that it will be unsafe for them to stay here in Kashmir anymore. So this is how they are taken, or they start their journey to Afghanistan, where they will eventually also meet the militant groups. After their return, the clashes with the police and the army become more frequent, and in one such clash, Mushtaq loses his friend Aziz. Later on in the narrative, Mushtaq decides to plan out his final blow by carrying a bag of grenades and blowing himself and a few of the armed forces people, calling it his final war. However, he rethinks the consequences of his plan and withdraws, thinking it is unfair on the end to harm or kill innocent civilians and bystanders on the road. He lets go of his plan and surrenders himself with his bag of the grenades to police. So this very act that, when he has gone to Afghanistan and he's kind of trained there, he receives his training to launch a war, to launch an attack, to be part of any kind of violent attacks that these militant groups may be planning, and these are the young guns, these are the young boys whom they rely upon to launch and make their acts successful. Just as we saw what happened in Mumbai in the Taj Hotel, that those were a few very young men who came, and this is how their minds were influenced, that they are going to be in the heaven if they do such kind of holy and pious act. This is how they are brainwashed, this is how they are manipulated, this is how they are fabricated. In the same way, Mushtaq is also going through the same training. Mushtaq is also going to the same kind of mind wash that usually happens in training, or in relying or in capitalizing on such young boys. So what happens is that while Mushtaq and his friend Aziz, they both have joined this militant group, Aziz is killed in one of the attacks, one of the fights that happened between Indian Army and the militant group. Mushtaq feels that it was the militant group also which was equally responsible in getting Aziz murdered, as they could have helped him, they could have prevented his killing, but did not do so. Okay. He faces a jail term of 7 years, and upon his release, he relocates to a town nearby Srinagar, where he becomes the owner of a restaurant. Finally, towards the epilogue, we see Ali, after his release, set off for the same path that Mushtaq once took, where he straps himself with grenades fastened to his chest and blows himself up along with 2 police personnel. So it is through the characters of Mushtaq and Ali we see 2 different kinds of gentlemen here, 2 boys from Kashmir here who have kind of taken different paths. Ali, when he is going to blow the bag of grenades, he has this kind of realization that in doing so, he is also going to kill the people, innocent people who have nothing to do in his animosity, in this revengeful act that he is going to launch on the army personnel. So why should they be killed? So it is this remorse, it is this, what you can say, wisdom, it is his ability to rectify himself, it is this human ability that the graphic novelists are going to say that not all boys from Kashmir are same, and in the form of Ali, through the character of Ali, we see that kind of radical anger, that kind of revengeful acts, that kind of animosity that people from Kashmir also also keep for the army personnel, Indian army personnel placed there. So there are 2 characters, Mushtaq and Ali, who follow different trajectories and kind of meet the 2 different kinds of fate. The artwork by Saurabh Singh complements the narrative of the graphic novel by using dark brooding frames and a sorted color palette to underscore the story's mood. The illustrations poignantly capture the tension and intensity of the story, as well as being particular to the human emotions and expression seen on characters' faces. Though released in 2007, the illustrations remain highly sensitive in detailing the objects and commodities of 90s India. Here it is mostly seen in the illustrations of the vehicles made, which try to visually synchronize the reader's experience with the narrative of the text, making the visual content remain fidel to the text presented. The artwork varies between monochromatic and crimson foregrounding. The symbolism for such colors is quite obvious, as red stands for everyday violence, blood and war that the valley experiences, and the monochrome reflects the gloom of living in such conditions. Speech bubbles are used sparingly, which makes sense given that the story is recounted rather than immediately recorded. Furthermore, the content of the conversation and the actions that follow are remembered, not the specifics of the conversations. So, the write up, as you would see in the usual comics and graphic novel, is not in the form of speech bubbles, but it is just the lines which are written freely without using any kind of speech boxes, which are written in the panels of the images that are drawn. So, there are no speech boxes, but the write up, the narration of the graphic novel goes freely without being contained in any kind of box and is placed next to the visuals that are being represented. The very idea of writing text in illustrated panels without any speech box in most of the pages gives the idea that the entire graphic novel is recollection where the speaker, by way of narration, is bringing back those memories in the form of illustrated pictures that he remembers from the past. The tone for the book was masterfully established by Saurabh Singh's grim and brutal depiction of convicts in cells smoking, praying, and conversing. The plot is given a decidedly straightforward appearance by making the cells dark enough that, save for the bars, you would mistake them for caverns. So the pictures in the graphic novel are so dark that whenever there is an image of jail, or if any person, if any terrorist group or any militant group is being represented, they are obviously represented in blacks. Then the background is completely, it is only the skin tone that emerges, it is only the facial features that emerges from the black. Otherwise, everything remains blank, black in the background. If there were no pictures, if there were no human beings, if there is whatever the action is happening, it's just the action which is brought to the light through color mode, but the entire background remains entirely black as if there is no light. So the graphic novel also borrows from cinematic technique of zoom in and zoom out. So there are many shots. The faces are either taken from a very far away angle, or they are taken from a very close angle. They are drawn in the, so the film technique is adopted in drawing these graphic novel with sudden movements and cross cutting from one scene to another. The major themes of this graphic novel include conflict and disillusionment. Kashmir Pending delves into exploring the impact and wounds, both psychological and emotional, left by the Kashmir conflict. Mushtaq becomes synonymous with the discontent and disillusionment that swept the youths in getting affixed in larger political struggle, and how, with time, idealisms of war and violence turned out to be mere disillusionment. Youth and resistance is another theme. The graphic novel also explores how easily the youth can be tempted to manipulation, as the narrative unveils how resistance movements target young minds and the sense of internal conflict they feel as they grow older, as Mushtaq represents. Moral ambiguity. Most of the characters remain morally ambiguous and are neither wholly good nor entirely bad. Each character had their own story to share and their own points to prove. Both the armed forces and the militant groups had their share of struggle and battles to fight. No party remains entirely right or wrong. Kashmir Pending takes an important grip over highlighting some of the tensions that were felt between the militant groups themselves, such as the organization that Mushtaq was working for versus organizations such as the K-Force. Now, some reflections on the major theme of the novel, which is very much pertinent all across all the graphic novels that we are going to discuss this week, and how that is countering reality, and how this graphic novel can also be utilized as a way of countering reality, or seeing something beyond the real material world that exists for all of us. So what are the techniques that it follows in doing so? Focus on personal narratives. While the Kashmir conflict is often framed as a geopolitical struggle, the novel on its end focuses on individual experiences rather than a grand political narrative. It is best highlighted in the narrative of Mushtaq, whose story offers a glance at perceiving the Kashmir conflict from a different lens. Humanizing militants. The graphic novel resists portraying the militants in mere framework of good and bad. The narrative helps us delve deeper into the individual experiences of the militants who involved themselves in the insurgency, showcasing to us their internal struggles, youthful idealism, and eventual disillusionment. Critique of ideology and nationalism. Although the Kashmir conflict is often presented as a battle between nationalism and separatism, the novel highlights and questions the ideologies that lead to division and conflict. By stressing Mushtaq's disillusionment with both sides, the graphic novel suggests that ideological purity is often a dangerous illusion as far as how such ideologies can be manipulated and used to control vulnerable individuals, which is often carried out at the human cost of individual lives. In conclusion, Kashmir Pending helps the reader explore and understand the Kashmir conflict from individual experiences rather than a grand political narrative. So, the novel offers the reader to look into the internal struggles and conflict of individual characters, especially those like Mushtaq, who remained caught in militant movements and organizations. Kashmir Pending, with its themes of disillusionment, identity, trauma, and the moral ambiguity of war, provides a complex understanding of the conflict instead of mere binaries or one sided narratives. By overshadowing the political schemes and narratives of the Kashmir struggle, the novel emphasizes the human cost of violence and the possibility of change and transformation. But before I end here, I would like to also tell you about that, once this graphic novel was published, and because it talks about Kashmir, and then it also through the character of Mushtaq, who kinds of takes a normative path as per the thinking of a larger society, that he turns back, he gets to know in the end that which is the right path and which is the wrong path, and he eventually mends his ways, correct himself, rectifies himself, and thus the graphic novelist, in a way, through the character of Mushtaq, tried to set an example of for all the youths of Kashmir, that whosoever is lost should resume the way, just like Mushtaq, because in retaliating or doing unlawful activities, it is not just their revenge and their ability to revenge that is only at stake against the army personals. It is not just them, that they are not only wrongfully placed there, they are misconceived, they have misunderstanding about the fact that the army personnel are there, are the only reason for the death and for the sadness, for the grief that prevails in the valley. But they are also wrong in going ahead with such kind of activities, because it not only brings ruin on the army personnel, but they are not only going against the state, but they are also risking the lives of so many innocent people who are nowhere in this fight between the militant groups and the state army. And why should their life be in any way be put to stake? Why should they be killed or murdered in this fight, which is just going to be another reason for increased bloodshed, violence and terror in the society, thus encouraging all sorts of activities, ironically, against which they have committed any such acts against the state. So most of the people from Kashmir, when they read this graphic novel, the response was very dim. The response was not so good, because the thing is that they believe that Mushtaq has kind of the graphic novelist have done some sort of injustice through the character of Mushtaq, by way of subsiding, by way of decreasing the kind of animosity that the people in the valley, Harbinger, they keep against the state, and they consider state as one of the repressive agencies in Kashmir Valley. But the graphic novelist, by placing Mushtaq and by making him open a tea stall in the end, they are trying to convey the idea that whosoever thinks of launching a rebellion against the army personnel, against the state, are misconceived in their notion, and they should think again that they have fallen into the wrong hands, and such kind of activities will only lead to more and more fear, will lead to more and more loss, chaos and disenchantment, and will only give rise to further disillusionment in the people of Kashmir. Thank you.